So since there's a movie with a Hulk out right now, and I already talked about the Incredible Hulk earlier in my MCU Lookback series, I thought I'd talk about the one Hulk movie that was still left on my roster. Lot of memories around this one, actually. I remember watching this in 2003, which is now 22 years ago. That really does a number on you. But I remember going into this movie not exactly knowing what to expect, because it was around the time that I was starting to get more into comic books and comic book movies in general. I had just seen Spider-Man the year prior. That was this eye-opening event, and it's just, gotten into Spider-Man comic books as well. And I've talked about this before, but when it comes to comic books and stuff like that, the person originally in my family who was a fan of these things was my dad. And so he was the one who was kind of like paving the way forward when it came to some of this stuff. And Hulk was something that he was very excited about when it dropped on opening weekend. He was like, we gotta go see this. We didn't see the other comic book movie that dropped before that, Daredevil. Not entirely sure why. I don't remember him mentioning at any point before Hulk came out, let's go see Daredevil. I guess that just went under the radar. But anyway, we went to go see Hulk. And I remember walking out of the movie and thinking I had a very good time with it. Eventually, I ended up becoming a huge fan of it. I had like action figures from the movie. There was this big puzzle that was there, which was like it said 3 feet tall. There's a picture of it right over here. The action figure that I had is still with me, actually. I don't have it on my person right now, but here's a picture of that, which I found on the internet. I think you can kind of get the gist of what this does, and it was a very cool figure. And it was just cool to, take Hulk, and then, like in the movie, he jumps around a lot, just be like, boing, boing, like, around the house. That was the thing. I even was a huge fan of the video game tie-in that came with it, which also acts like a sequel to the movie. And that was a whole lot of fun to play, just to smash things around as Hulk. The Bruce Banner missions were whatever, but like, just, whenever you turn into Hulk, just being able to punch stuff was a huge blast. And that was one of those games that I have a lot of, great memories of. In fact, I still have that game, I think, lying somewhere. But getting into the movie itself, this is one of those movies that I also acknowledge not everybody loved, because at the time it came out, we found out later on the reviews were a bit all over the place. Not everybody loved it. Some people did, but there were reservations. Audiences especially were not a big fan of it. But having seen the movie multiple times since, even, since 2003 to this point, this is one of those things where I feel like I don't really agree with a lot of that. And it's one of those movies that, is in my list of movies where I understand a lot of people didn't like it, but it did work for me on a lot of levels, and there is a lot of reverence I have towards what they pulled off over here. Ang Lee directing this right after Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is a very interesting choice, and the story that he ends up really making with Hulk is something that captures an aspect of Bruce Banner that I think is the strongest in this movie, which is just the tragedy of being Bruce Banner. Because if you read the comics as well, and if you just look into, his entire Hulk persona, if you will, there is a sadness to it. It's not something that he necessarily enjoys whenever he gets to, turn into this big green monster and smash things apart. And the way that this movie looks at it, like sort of this extended metaphor for this trauma and stress sort of building within ourselves, eventually leading to this explosive reaction. I feel like that's something that if you play that, with what's being seen in a comic book movie in 2003, might not land for everyone, and that's completely fine. But I think that it did a very good job of just, again, showcasing just the burden of being that. And as you're seeing Bruce's childhood explored with his father, David Banner, doing experiments on himself at first and mutating his cells, and then that being in Bruce as well after he's born. And there is an entire kerfuffle around that, because eventually his experiments are about to be shut down, and he almost like has this fit of insanity, and in an attempt to try and kill Bruce because of what he could be, he ends up accidentally killing Bruce's mother. And that creates a level of trauma in him that Bruce was never really able to resolve. It suppresses those memories, and now that he has what he has inside of him, eventually when he turns into the Hulk, all of that is building that trauma within him, making him who he is. These repressed memories that Bruce has unlocking one at a time once his father re-emerges is something that, again, I think the movie manages to excel at. And Eric Bana is very good as Bruce Banner in this movie. I think he did a very good job, and I thought this even at the time. I was like, this is a very solid performance from him, and how he manages to convey that aspect of Bruce, I think it landed very efficiently. Same thing with Jennifer Connelly as Betty. I thought she was very good as Betty and complemented Bana's performance quite nicely. Much like you've seen in other stuff before, Betty is the one person Bruce cares about, and he knows, even as Hulk, there is that aspect to her, which is like, she can see through that and be like, I can see the man behind the monster. And so that's something that the movie also, whenever it taps into that, it does so very effectively. There is one point in particular towards the end where I thought they really nailed that. And Nick Nolte as David Banner, having so much fun with this role, and he's really good. Even when the movie gets bigger later and things become a little more over the top when it comes to his character, he sells all of that very effectively, and I love his performance in this. I'll talk more about him in a second because there's a specific scene I really want to highlight, but I'll get to that in a bit. Then of course it comes to the Hulk aspect of it, and I think whenever you get to see Bruce turn into Hulk, most of the scenes that you get with Hulk are fun. There's some great stuff over there, and some of them are among my favorite Hulk moments, when it comes to screen. There's one bit in particular that I used to replay on loop when the movie was available for home, which is that point where he charges out of the military base and starts running. That was the most awesome thing I remember seeing as a kid. He just goes into this full speed run that'll give Usain Bolt a run for his money, no pun intended. And when you're seeing that happen, I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Ditto for the tank scene that follows after. That was awesome when I saw that as a kid. Then the spitting out a missile bit at a chopper. There's some cool stuff in here, guys. I mean, there's stuff sprinkled throughout this movie that is genuinely quite impressive. I can't, help but have that, silly smile on my face when I'm seeing that. And then eventually when he does these massive miles-long jumps, it actually leads to this beautiful scene where he's jumping around and the music from Danny Elfman is playing in the background. And I'm like, this is great. Just letting some of those moments really, really breathe amidst all of the action moments. Some of those could be a bit better, I will say that. I don't think in my entire time since watching the movie, the Hulk dogs thing has really improved. I would say that's still the weakest part of the entire movie. Yes, there's a big CGI finale in the end, but I much prefer that to everything that, happens with the Hulk dogs. It just feels like this scene that's, sort of tacked on there to be we need another action scene. Throw this in there. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened, because it's the one scene that really doesn't work with the rest of the movie. Because eventually the second half of it becomes more about trying to harness Bruce's powers, because that's something that's always been there. And so, Josh Lucas comes in as Talbot, and General Ross eventually gets involved in that, played by Sam Elliott, who is also so much fun in this movie. And so there is that entire dynamic also going on, in the background. And then that entire back half of the movie is a lot more entertaining. And, David getting the absorbing man powers is also a wee bit of fun. I really like the first time he gets it though. It's like his hand is sticking to different surfaces and he's trying to move it, but it keeps sticking. And then eventually he's able to, do it in a way that he crushes the security guard in front of him. And that's something that, again, towards the end of the movie, you get to see the full extent of those powers. Something about this movie that comes up a lot is the visual design of the movie. Not just in terms of the visual effects, but the way that it's edited and the way that it looks. It looks like a comic book. Now, this is something that has polarized many people. Some people like the editing choices made, some do not. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say, it is awesome. I remember seeing that back in the day and even in the time since, just to make this feel like an actual comic book with some of those editing choices, actual panels, and those, split screen effects that they're doing. It's really cool. Like, it's the kind of thing that, really roots it in the genre that it is. And I think it's actually kind of an underrated aspect of the movie. And some of that turmoil I was mentioning earlier with Bruce and him being Hulk, I really like some of the more literal representations of that. There's that one really cool moment where he sees Hulk through the mirror and they're both like wiping off the fog from it, and then Hulk breaks through. That was a really cool moment. It's when he's falling from the jet that he, grabs onto in San Francisco. He's like trying to save the jet. So that's something that's very interesting. Like, it doesn't seem like he wanted to harm the jet. I think the jet was all over the place. And so I think he was trying to steer it from hitting the bridge or something like that. But then that was also taken as a, hey, let's, take him up and take him out in some way. But I don't know. I always saw it as one of those moments from Hulk. And then when he eventually gets into San Francisco and he turns back into Bruce, I like that part where Betty finds him and he's like, "You found me." She's like, "You weren't that hard to find." It's like, "Yeah, I was." I'm like, "Yep." I mean, if you it's a double entendre, but I did like that. It leads to my favorite dialogue moment of the movie. There's a couple of them, and both of them involve Nolte. One of them is when he's talking to Betty about what happened in Bruce's childhood, the death of his mother by his hands, the gamma explosion that, sort of happens at the facility, which Ross, after Ross ejects him, and then eventually when he gets to see Bruce properly before their big final battle. And there's this conversation happening between them where Bruce is being able to fully recollect a lot of his mom's memory, especially how she looked and, the perfume that she had. It's this really great moment. And then you have David coming in being like, "No, son, I really want your power as well. I've come upon something really cool here." Just the selfishness of this coming through, pointing fingers at everything going on with what the military has been able to do. It's like, they've been doing way worse, and we could do great stuff with the stuff that we have. It's like, no, that's not really how this is. You're trying to make it work, are you? I mean, it's just very, very, clear that this is a very, self-absorbed man. No pun intended. That becoming a huge basis of the fight that they're having. Just, you want this power, then take it. See what happens with you. And then that big bubble that forms eventually in the water. It's like, there's so much built around that when it comes to just this unfinished business that's between the two of them and this broken relationship. And yet, after the explosion, and we know that David is done for, and I like that bit where Bruce is in the water and he gets that memory of his dad saying goodnight to him. Just that little bit of even despite everything that had happened, there was a tiny sliver in there of a man who cared for his son. And the fact that, again, the movie hones in on those things is very interesting. It makes for a fascinating comic book movie. Not a perfect one. There are issues with Hulk. Some of the storylines are not very, effective. The whole military thing and everything going on with Talbot, fine. I already mentioned the Hulk dogs thing. It just seemed a little unnecessary. But at the end of the day, I still have a great amount of, appreciation for Hulk. And it's a movie that I enjoy rewatching. The remaster that they did for the 4K is dazzling. They've color corrected a lot of the movie and they, changed it from looking like this, grimy, dusty thing that was on the Blu-ray earlier to something that's a lot more clear. I did like that quite a bit. And so it's one that I enjoy rewatching still to this day. Now, I know that you're watching this video. Maybe you don't agree with that. Maybe everything I've said so far, you're watching it with a sense of skepticism, really? But that's fine. Everybody has different takes on movies. That's what makes these kinds of things interesting. Not everybody has to feel the same about something. I have a great, like I said, nostalgia towards this movie, and it's something that I like revisiting. I get a great character, study for Bruce Banner, and I get some great Hulk moments in the process as well. But at the same time, if that doesn't work for you, this movie in general, then I get it. It's fine, and that's just something that's there. But at the end of the day, I still think it's one of the more unique movies in this genre. And when you look back on the early 2000s, when they were really trying to get a lot of this going, it feels like one of those efforts that I think it does stand very differently compared to a lot of the other stuff that was going on. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very soon. I hope you guys enjoy. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a lot of fun to make, and it's something that I've been wanting to do for a while, so I appreciate if you've taken the time to watch it. As always, if you like this, please just subscribe. Thank you very much as always for watching. It means the world to me, and I will see you guys at the movies.